Welcome to History Happy Hour, a special series from History Uncovered. It's the end of March 2024, and we've handpicked a few of our favorite history stories from this month. Today, we'll be talking about
the discovery of a mass grave of Black Death victims in Nuremberg,
the story of how a well-preserved Ming tomb was found in China,
how archaeologists finally unearthed the missing half of a Ramses II statue in Egypt,
the discovery of Europe's oldest known human settlement in Ukraine,
and the discovery of a golden ring with Christ imagery in Sweden,
as well as a number of historical anniversaries from March, including the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, the discovery of China's terracotta army, and much more. I'm All That's Interesting staff writer Austin Harvey.
And I'm All That's Interesting staff writer Kalina Fraga.
And welcome to History Happy Hour.
Yeah, welcome. I guess the first news story that we're covering is this discovery of this massive grave in Nuremberg. And it was pretty crazy. They were conducting a survey before they built a retirement home, and they started to find human remains, which was a surprise because they knew that there might be a fortification from the 30 Years' War or something, but this was not expected. And at first they thought that maybe the remains they were finding were from World War II and from the bombing of Nuremberg in 1943.
That was what popped into my head at first, was Nuremberg trials, things like that. But no, it predates that by a couple hundred years.
Yeah, they did some radiocarbon dating and they realized these bones were from between the 15th or 17th centuries. And they think that there could be as many as 2,000 people buried there.
Oh my God,
yeah.
Wow.
When we wrote the article, 1,000 had been documented, but they think it's much bigger. So they're still excavating the site.
Yeah, that's massive. Normally when we talk about mass graves, it's 100 people, which is still a lot. Still a lot of people to be buried in one place. But
thousands.
This is massive, yeah. All presumably plague victims.
Yes. Once they had the dating, they knew that they were probably plague victims, especially because they were buried in a very haphazard way. They weren't buried their arms crossing their chests or on their back.
Right.
People were buried in stacks, kind of like they'd been thrown into the grave.
Just kind of dump them and get them out of the way because
exactly
to stop it from spreading. And
the problem was that Nuremberg had a bunch of waves of the plague, so they had to narrow it down, which they did by looking at the radiocarbon dating, which helped narrow it down. Like I said, between the 15th and 17th centuries. They also found coins with the people from 1619 to 1621. So from that, they think it's the 1632 to 1633 wave of the plague, which killed 15,000 people, and the city at the time was 50,000. So
wow,
yeah, a lot of people. Yeah. Anyway, so that was kind of a fascinating, gruesome discovery in Germany this month.
Yeah, I feel like we've had a couple stories, not exactly the same, but very similar kind of vein, where this new construction project, and then they unearth all these.
Yeah, well, we just had another one. There was another one this month where they were checking out a site where they're going to build an Intel factory, and they found a Neolithic burial in Germany as well.
Right,
not a mass grave, but
there's also that abbey that they had been unearthing where they found a bunch of stuff as well. It's always funny when in Europe they do these construction projects, very innocuous things. It's we're going to put a parking garage in, we're going to put a parking lot here. Yeah. It's always parking lots or grocery stores,
right?
Or something very, very just whatever, run of the mill. And then it leads to this amazing archaeological discovery where it's holy crap, there's thousands of people here.
I know, we're walking on history all the time, or they are, especially in places like Europe, where there's just layers and layers and layers of history.
Another ongoing archaeological project, this time in China. The Zhanxi Provincial Institute of Archaeology and the Xinzhou Municipal Institute of Cultural Relics recently discovered an astonishingly well-preserved tomb dating back to the Ming dynasty. Massive, massive tomb, just kind of in the middle of the village of, I'm going to try and pronounce this right, Hejitou, Hexitou.
Okay.
In the Xinfu district, and it is this massive tomb, contains a main burial chamber, an antechamber, as well as multiple branching passageways and niches. And they found an epitaph that reads, "Epitaph of the Prince of Ming Ru Huan," which might possibly identify the person interred there, but there's no actual confirmation on that.
Wow. And the photos are pretty amazing of inside. It's just it's been a time capsule preserved for centuries.
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of old wooden relics, intricately carved pieces of furniture.
Wow.
Vases filled with grain and liquids and oils. It's very, very interesting. What I was surprised by, and maybe I shouldn't have been, but these things weren't in the best of condition. A lot of like the wooden tables and chairs and things had kind of fallen in on themselves over time.
Well, it's pretty old, right? The Ming Dynasty is a long time ago.
Yeah, the Ming Dynasty was 1368 to 1644.
Some time has passed.
Yeah, quite a long dynasty as well there.
Yeah.
Nearly 3 centuries long, so that's pretty influential.
It kind of reminds me of a story that was in the New York Times a couple weeks ago about mausoleums in some cemetery in New York. And they were visited by stained glass experts because this stained glass is like so, it's been untouched and it's unique and they wanted to check it out. So they did.
Oh, that's cool.
I know. I always think about this. There's another cemetery. It wasn't this cemetery in the article, but there's one near me that's fairly famous. And they have all these mausoleums that are just like, big stone houses, basically.
Yeah.
I always am kind of curious like what they look like inside.
Oh, me too. Yeah, it's very interesting. You have to wonder how important a person must have been to earn such massive mausoleum.
Someone with the money. I mean,
right. Yeah. Not to conflate importance with economic status.
Sure.
But, a person of reasonable means or with a family of reasonable means. It is very interesting.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, we talk a lot about the pyramids, like the Egyptian pyramids, which are massive tombs and structures. They were very dedicated, but the pharaohs who were buried there were kind of worshipped as gods.
Mm-hmm. Right. I thought you were setting up the next news story there.
That would have been such a good transition.
I was like waiting for it.
No, it wasn't. Oh, that's so funny. Speaking of Egyptian discoveries, this was a cool story.
Very cool.
The Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities recently announced that they found the upper half of a statue of King Ramses II, which fits with the bottom half of a statue they found just under 100 years ago.
That's amazing. I love that.
It's very cool. The funny thing is it wasn't far away from where the bottom half was found.
Uh-huh.
So it's like very likely that, hundreds of years ago, this statue broke in half and then got covered by sand. 100 years ago, a German group of archaeologists found the lower half, and then now they found the upper half that goes with it, and they're working to restore it. It's made of limestone. It's very interesting.
That's fascinating.
But it's also kind of funny to think like if they had walked 20 more feet.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
They just found the whole statue.
There must just be so many, like when you're exploring a place like Egypt, such a rich history, like where do you start? It's so many places to look at.
Yeah. And there are many, many, many statues dedicated to King Ramses II.
Mm-hmm.
He was like one of Egypt's most celebrated, most powerful pharaohs. He reigned for roughly 66 years, which
not too bad. Yeah, it's a long time.
I mean, most pharaohs, I think, did not last that long. King Tut, famously.
Well, yeah. It's like 19 or something when he died.
Yes. Most of them were very young or they didn't live very long for a multitude of reasons. But yeah, King Ramses II ruled from 1279 to 1213 BCE. So this is a very long time ago.
Gosh.
And you can find statues dedicated to him, notably at the twin temples of Abu Simbel. There are 4 65-foot tall statues dedicated to Ramses II. And now they have another complete statue to add to that list. So.
Wow. That's so interesting that it's that old, too. Adds another layer of, oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm scanning the article. I don't know if they actually dated
the statues themselves.
Statue, right.
Well, just that it came from an era where that he was the pharaoh is still impressive.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting that it's a story that started in 1930 and wrapped up now, which is very interesting.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I would love to go to... I just read this book on Cleopatra. I might have mentioned this already, but the way I
think you did, yeah.
Yeah, she described the city of Alexandria in just such vivid terms. And I know the city's totally different now, and a lot of it's underwater, the original city, but it made me really want to go to Alexandria and check it out.
Oh, I think it'd be so fascinating.
Yeah.
I think I'm always... I'm so bummed about it. No, I'm always disappointed every time I think about the library of Alexandria and everything that was lost in that fire.
Right.
It just obviously there's nothing I could have done to prevent that. It was thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
But what a tragic loss. I mean, that would have, I'm just so curious. Like, if I could have one, got to phrase this carefully. If I could have one question about Earth's history answered,
Yeah.
I think it would be what was in that library.
It's an interesting question because there's, this project going on right now to use AI to read the scrolls that were like burned to charcoal at Pompeii. And
I did not know that. That's very cool.
It's so fascinating because they're basically like, I think it's like hundreds of scrolls. They're like blocks of charcoal and you can't open them or they'll disintegrate. But with AI, they've been able to start reading them, like scanning them and differentiating, I guess, where the ink is. And so it's going.
Oh, that's really cool.
It's slow going. The last I read about it was like they identified one word, which was purple. But there's so many lost texts. And I think this was at some like nobleman's in his library. And so that there could be a lot of really cool stuff there.
Yeah, that's a really cool use of AI.
Yeah.
Like when that technology is used to do something that humans are actually incapable of doing. I think that's so fascinating.
It's really
and I'm
fascinating.
All for the development of technology like that.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really cool.
Right. It's a bit more useful perhaps than like translating Shakespeare to whatever you did, Jen.
I
Gen
disagree. Translating Shakespearean sonnets into Gen Z language with ChatGPT is so funny.
I sent around what you did to some people and they thought it was pretty funny too.
It's great. It's so funny.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It was pretty funny.
What a way to it's like it's equally as hard to understand, but for completely different reasons as a millennial.
Right. Yeah. It's just like a little bit upsetting, but
here, an example for the listeners. Shakespeare's famous line. What light through yonder window breaks, right? ChatGPT's Gen Z version. Yo, check it. What's this lit vibe from that window over there? It's all east side and Juliet's straight up shining like the sun.
I hate it. And I love it, but I mostly hate it.
I mostly hate it too, but it's that occupied a solid 20 minutes of my life yesterday. So
yeah, it was very entertaining.
Yeah, got to take what you can get. You got to take what you can get in these trying times.
So true, so true. That's the future. Let's go back to the past now. Back to the past. Thank you. The next news story is they've discovered what is right now the oldest European settlement, human settlement in Ukraine. They found these stone tools there, and using the kind of new dating technology, they determined they're 1.4 million years old, which is pretty old.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like if to an untrained eye, these tools, I mean, to me, just kind of look like a rock, but I guess they were used, to kill animals and to make fire, they think. And it's evidence that people lived there that long ago. Homo erectus, not Homo sapiens.
Yeah, the picture is very funny it really is just a photo taken from somebody's cell phone holding up a sort of spongy looking rock.
Yeah.
But it is referred to as a stone tool.
I know. I saw that and I was like, huh. I mean, if I saw that, I wouldn't look twice.
Right. Not quite as old, not 1.4 million years old, closer to 500 years old. Astounding nonetheless. In Kalmar, Sweden, during ongoing archaeological excavations, they found this gold ring that has the image of Jesus Christ on it, which weirdly, the theory here is that somebody lost it.
Because you wouldn't throw it away, probably, a ring like that. Like, why would you throw away a ring?
Very beautiful, very valuable.
Unless you were mad at whoever gave it to you and then you throw it out the window or something.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. But I thought that was kind of a funny detail because normally we talk about these things and there was a house there, there was a grave there, there was some point of significance. Why would this object be here? And with this, they were like, oh no, somebody probably just lost it.
Well, wasn't it found like some other objects seemed to be discarded? Like there was some other, I can't remember what it was in the articles, like some other like stone or something.
There was an Alcyn gem, which is a small glass stone believed to have been used as a pilgrim amulet.
Yeah. For some reason they thought it had been discarded because it was like broken or... Yeah.
There's no way to know when it broke.
That's true.
It could have broken at any point since it was discarded. They dated that one back to the 13th or 14th century. So I don't even know if these two things necessarily correlated to each other at all. But yeah, they theorized someone was unlucky and lost the ring 500 years ago.
That's so interesting.
And that the Allison gem may have been broken and thrown away. Which, I just think it's so funny. Like, how often throughout history do you think people just lost things? Probably fairly often.
Yeah, all the time, yeah.
But it very rarely comes up in a story that we cover that someone's like, oh yeah, they probably just lost whatever this is.
Right, yeah. I feel like we have another article about a Jesus ring, but I think it was a shipwreck that they found it. So that person did
exactly.
lose it.
Like, yeah, shipwrecks, things like that, where it's like there's a story there. It's like, I don't know, somebody lost this ring. Somebody's lost it.
We don't know. It's yeah.
Yeah. 2,000 years from now, they'll find a pair of AirPods. They'll be like, oh, geez, somebody lost these. They fell down a sewer grate.
It'll be like finding arrowheads or something. They find AirPods like everywhere all the time under like all these layers of...
Yeah. And because they're plastic, they never go away.
Yeah. Someone got unlucky. Yeah. That is one of my fears as I walk over grates or in the subway.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't happened yet. So now we're moving on to our historic anniversary section of the show. So the first one's a pretty sad one. It's the death of John Candy on March 4th, 1994. I don't know if you are a John Candy fan. I mean, obviously he died like...
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I'm a big Spaceballs fan. And so, he holds a special place in my heart as Barf.
Oh, I see. I haven't seen Spaceballs.
Did you ever see Spaceballs?
No.
Oh God, okay, yeah. He's like the parody version of Chewbacca. His name's Barf.
Oh.
He's a dog man. John Candy played him. Fantastic role. Great movie.
Yeah, he's in all sorts of stuff.
You should see that movie.
Yeah, maybe. Put it on my list, I
Probably
guess.
not.
I probably won't see it unless I'm with someone and they're like, do you want to watch this? And then I'll be like, oh, someone said, I don't know.
That's fair. My family watched it on Christmas Eve.
Oh.
We sat around and we put Spaceballs on. But yeah, John Candy, very, very good comedic actor, also known for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Uncle Buck, small role in Home Alone and Splash.
Yeah.
So
he was very young. He was only 43 when he died. He had a heart attack. His father also died of a heart attack at 38. And I guess John Candy felt this like constant dread that the same thing would happen to him. So it's sad that that's what happened. Yeah. That often happens, it seems like, in families where like your father and grandfather, great grandfather all have heart attacks. Like you're just more likely. Yeah. This next one, I guess, is also sort of a darker story. I mean, it's a really dark story. This one is it's a 10-year anniversary of the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370.
That's actually insane. I cannot believe it's been a decade.
Do you remember last month we talked about Amelia Earhart and the guy that like thought apparently he thinks, or his company thinks, that they can find this plane too. Like they're like, we could probably do it. Saw some headline about that anyway. But people have looked for it. Like it's been a huge search, obviously, and they found debris. The debris's washed up, but it's still a mystery of exactly what happened to this plane. So scary.
It's very weird that can happen in such a modern, technologically advanced era.
That the plane can go down like that and it can get lost. Yeah,
that's wild. I mean, just you think about how like people can track Elon Musk's private jet
or Taylor Swift
Swift's, but we can't find this mass plane that was just like a standard.
It's just a plane going from Malaysia to China. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think this happened like right after the TV show Lost had aired its finale, or a few years after maybe. So I think there was like some people were like, oh, I don't know, how weird this like cultural moment, but yeah, it's pretty awful. I mean, they don't know what happened. They think there were different theories that there was a hijacker, if the pilot took the plane down, some sort of murder-suicide thing, or there's a problem with the cargo. Like, they just don't know. It's like terrifying.
Yeah. No, it's very scary. It's scary that this kind of stuff can happen, yet planes are also the safest form of travel, which, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on right now with Boeing as well, in the wake of that.
That's right.
Recent incident where a hatch door just opened.
Yeah, like over Oregon or something.
Flew off.
That was pretty bad.
"10 years ago, this airline vanished. 150 years ago, a man who vanished was born.
Hey, yes.
Harry Houdini, born March 24th, 1874, 150 years ago.
It's so interesting to think, like, if Harry Houdini had been around today, would he be like a giant TikTok star or something, like doing all these feats, you know? He had this talent. Like, how would he spread the word?
I think he'd be like a Darren Brown Are you familiar with Darren Brown?
No.
He's he describes himself as a mentalist because he doesn't do like mind freak magic. He's a British. He does very like psychologically influenced magic stuff. For example, I think he was on James Corden and did it wasn't quite hypnosis. He talked in a way that he was able to convince James Corden to eat glass.
Oh my God.
He did a Netflix special where he took somebody who was a very staunch MAGA Trump supporter who had some racist viewpoints towards South Americans. And by the end of the special, that guy took a bullet for a Mexican immigrant. It was a fake bullet, but he thought it was real.
Oh my God.
That's had a British
scary.
TV series where I think the best way I can exemplify the kind of psychological like manipulation that he does that is similar to magic. He had a TV show where an audience was sitting in a theater watching a screen, and the video they were watching was of this guy's night out on the town, and everybody in the theater was wearing a mask, and they would vote whether they wanted something good or bad to happen to this guy in that moment.
Oh.
So it started off very innocuous where they were like, okay, he's arrived at the bar. Okay, cool. Now we can vote. Is he going to get a free round of drinks, or is the guy sitting next to him going to accuse him of slapping his girlfriend's butt? And pretty much in every instance, the audience voted for the bad thing to happen. And at the end of the night, the guy gets back home and they were going to award him a cash prize and be like, hey, thank you for being on this show tonight as basically our victim. And then he gave them one final vote. And he's like, do you want to give him the money, the $15,000 or whatever it was? Or do you want his night to keep going? We're going to stage a kidnapping if you guys vote for that one.
Oh my God.
And they all voted for it.
Oh, I don't like this.
And then they watched as this guy gets almost kidnapped and then runs into the street and gets hit by a car.
Oh my God.
And then the production, like all the lights come on, Darren Brown walks off and acts like, oh my God, this horrible thing just happened, this tragedy. And all the people are kind of like stunned, like, oh my God, what do we just do? They start taking off their masks. You can see that some of them are crying. Darren Brown comes back out and goes, that was pre-recorded footage. That didn't actually happen.
Oh my God.
But take a moment to consider the fact that you all voted for that. And it was a way of showing like this, how this anonymous kind of crowd mentality can shape people to make worse decisions when that human connection element is removed from it.
Sure.
So a lot of his stuff ties back into similar elements. So I think Harry Houdini would be like that. This
is like the story you told last time about the Japanese guy on that game show who... Yeah. Ugh. I don't like this. We're in the worst timeline.
Yeah. Well, at least Darren Brown's doing this stuff to illustrate
I guess so.
a larger point. And not everything he did was like that. I think at one point he did one where he like convinced somebody that a zombie apocalypse was actually happening.
Oh.
I forget the name of his show. I'll send you a link later. It's very, very interesting to watch. The reason I know about him is because I read a book he wrote about happiness.
Oh, did it have good advice?
Yeah. Yeah, that was like right when I was like starting to go to therapy a few years ago. I read his book. It's just called Happy. But because his stuff is so based in psychology, it didn't feel like I was reading David Blaine's book on how to be happy, right? You know, it was...
I see, yeah.
It was very like, he cited studies and it was very well written. So, book recommendation there.
Interesting.
Happy by Darren Brown.
Well, Harry Houdini, as far as I know, didn't write any books, but he was an interesting guy.
I know, that was a long tangent. It had nothing to do with Harry Houdini.
I mean, there's some crossover there, but...
Yeah. But I mean, if you're asking what do I think Harry Houdini would be like in the modern age, do I think he'd be like a TikTok shyster or maybe somebody who actually had an impact? I think based on the kinds of pioneering work he did, it might be something more akin to a Darren Brown.
It is interesting though, because if he was like if Harry Houdini was on TikTok or something, people would be like, oh, that's fake. Like he edited that, you know, and he was doing all these stunts,
that's true,
you know, in front of crowds of thousands of people. So
that's true. Well, there are TikTok magicians whose shtick is how they edit. That they do like very like the magic is the editing, and I think that's kind of its own talent. You know, it's impressive in its own right. I
guess I can see that. I feel like the power of like quote unquote magic is seeing something before you that you can't explain, like something like sawing someone in half or making something disappear, like little magic tricks. When you see it on a screen, you're kind of like, I mean, the edit isn't that. I don't know. I've never seen that, so I don't know. But
there was this one guy I saw on TikTok forever ago. Oh, Zach King. That's his name. I just typed TikTok magician, scrolled down a little bit. His name's Zach King. I'll send you a video of his later. But yeah, it's very impressive because he makes it look like he's doing magic. He refers to it as digital sleight of hand. So I think it's impressive in its own right. He was a Vine guy, not a TikTok guy. So
interesting. This next one is actually a really fascinating story, and it's the basis of this really great book by Penelope Joseph called The Sword and the Shield, which is about the one and only time that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King met, which was a really brief meeting 60 years ago. They were in D.C. to attend a debate on the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and I don't know, it just kind of encapsulated a lot because before this meeting, they were sort of on different sides of the civil rights movement in a way. You know, MLK was all about nonviolence and nonviolent protest, and Malcolm X was more like, Malcolm X critiqued him for, he said, you're making people like defenseless in the face of this like horrible beast of racism, white people. But by the time they met, Malcolm X had left the Nation of Islam. He was showing like new openness to work with the civil rights movement. And MLK was also going through this evolution of becoming more militant. You know, he was he never like disavowed nonviolence, but he was expanding, you know, his, he was against the war in Vietnam. He wanted to launch this war on poverty. So they're kind of moving like toward each other when they met. But they never met again. And then, of course, the next year, Malcolm X is assassinated. 3 years later, MLK is assassinated. So there's just this one moment of like, so interesting. These two leaders of the civil rights movement meet. And then, but the book by Joseph is just like fantastic. I would highly recommend it. Yeah.
The Sword and the Shield. That's a very good title for that book in particular.
Yeah. I believe it's based on a quote by one of them, I think by King, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Either way, very interesting. Very representative of their different stances on how this topic should be handled.
Yeah. Yeah. Malcolm X is really fascinating. I've never seen the movie Malcolm X.
I have not seen it either, but
that is on my list of movies to watch at some point.
Yeah, I would like to learn more. I think most people know more about Martin Luther King Jr. than they do Malcolm X. But
yeah, I think Malcolm X has been seen for so long as like he's been seen as like a radical, so he wasn't taught in like schools or anything. But he had a really important role in the civil rights movement. So it's interesting. There was just a book written by a father. I think it was mostly written by the father. Then he died, and his daughter finished the book about Malcolm X and his family and kind of how they fit in within the civil rights movement back in like the 1920s and its very early seeds of it and everything. So. Yeah, I think he's been getting like more attention than he had in the past.
I think that makes sense. There's a lot of figures like him who were neglected on a large scale, we'll say, right?
Sure.
Who I think have been given more time and attention lately as the political situation in America requires us to kind of look back at these movements with a new lens.
Yeah,
and say things haven't changed that much in some places. Why?
Right. And then also, I mean, pushing back against certain politicians who want to not teach this stuff in school at all.
Right.
And that's, I think, not the way to go. But
no, I think that's a very shouldn't be a controversial statement, but no, I agree. I think it's very bad to erase and whitewash history. Whitewash here meaning cover up the less savory parts, let's say.
Yeah, definitely.
As people who talk about history and write about history and read about history on a daily basis, it's, you know, those who, what is that in that famous quote? Those who don't study the past are doomed to repeat it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's very true. Very poignant.
It is true. Anyway, I guess our next anniversary here is a pretty cool one, I think. It's when this terracotta army was found in China.
Yeah,
the terracotta army. You haven't seen pictures of this. Yeah. Yes, the terracotta army. It's amazing. I mean, these farmers were just like digging a well and they started to find this stuff. And then Beijing got involved and they found hundreds more, these terracotta warriors, and not just warriors, but like horses and they're all unique. I mean, their faces are different, their facial hair and everything. It's pretty cool. So now 8,000 have been discovered.
Yeah,
and
they're all being stored in a warehouse now, which is
it's really cool. Yeah,
you can look at the picture and I mean, it just looks like hundreds of people lined up next to each other. It's
an army. Yeah,
an army. And they're like life size, right? I mean, they're
big. Yeah,
it's crazy. It almost feels like you could line them up in times of war back in this period. If you had lined them up on like a hilltop, you could have made it seem like your army was like way bigger than it really was.
Right.
I don't think that was not what they were used for, but
no, it's like for an emperor's tomb or something. But
yeah,
it is cool. I mean, there are some awesome photos. We actually have a gallery on the site of the Terracotta Army.
Yeah, it's very cool. More than 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots with 520 horses, and an additional 150 cavalry horses.
Mm.
The majority of which remain in situ in the pits near Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum.
So cool. Just like talk about like an amazing discovery, be like digging a well and suddenly you find this figure.
Yeah, and also just the artistry that goes into it. I mean, the pure like craftsman skill of it. It's mind-boggling to make that many of them too. People had too much time back in the day.
They knew how to use their time. Sometimes we have these discussions in Slack where we're talking about like Gen Z lingo and stuff, and I'm like, people used to like build things their hands, it wasn't
right.
But anyway, I'm being an old person.
Yeah. Speaking
of old things, it's our final anniversary here is the 135th anniversary of the opening of the Eiffel Tower, which is cool. It's made for the 1889 World's Fair. It was completed in just over 2 years, which was very fast. But by the time it opened, it wasn't like quite done. They were still doing some things on the inside and installing the elevators. But at the time, it was the tallest tower in the world and very
I didn't know that.
Impressive sight.
It's cool.
And not to bring up this book again, because I know I brought it up like 100 times, but that
Devil in the White City.
The book, yes, Devil in the White City. When they started planning the Chicago World's Fair, they were like, "How are we going to do better than the Eiffel Tower?"
Right, and then the Ferris wheel.
Spoiler, yeah.
Spoiler for history.
Yeah. Well, in the book, he sets it up so well. I
think we have that discussion every time. Too.
I think we do too. Yeah. But I think that's so interesting.
It is very fun. It is. It's funny in hindsight to think that the Ferris wheel was how they won up to the Eiffel Tower.
I mean, it's like a tower, but it moves.
I know. It's just so funny because, like, now in a modern context, we think of Ferris wheels as like, oh, that thing it's at your state fair. It's at a carnival. It's this kind of like spinning metal death trap that like could come unhinged at any moment. Where
that's
teenagers
true. It's not like
go to like make
landscape,
out,
or a landmark,
right? Whereas like the Eiffel Tower is the Eiffel Tower. I mean, it's a massive
Tour Eiffel,
massive landmark in France. It's just funny.
There's some Ferris wheels that are landmarks, like in London.
Oh, for sure.
There's the big Ferris wheel, and other places probably.
Yeah, not to say that there aren't, but just it's not like every state fair has a little Eiffel Tower that you can go in.
Yeah, I mean, Eiffel Tower is cool, and it actually is our cocktail of today's episode of History Happy Hour. The cocktail is called La Tour Eiffel, and it was created in 2007 by this guy named Gary Regan. His nickname was Gaz, but he was thinking about what a Sazerac would be like if it had been invented in France. So La Tour Eiffel is kind of like a Sazerac, which happens to be one of my favorite drinks and my go-to when I'm in a bar because I can't make it myself.
I don't think I've ever had a Sazerac, and I'm actually looking up what one is right now.
They're fun if you want like a slightly fancier drink.
It's a close cousin to the old-fashioned that consists of rye, whiskey, or brandy, bitters, sugar, and absinthe. Oh, so it's just like an old-fashioned with absinthe.
An absinthe rinse, yes.
The rinse. That actually sounds great because I very much enjoy absinthe.
Me too.
American absinthe that just kind of tastes like black licorice. I've never had the kind that like makes you trip balls or whatever.
Oh, right. Yeah. It has the wood something. Yeah. They say. Yeah, I also like absinthe a lot. But anyway, in this cocktail, it's similar to a Sazerac. So you start with the absinthe rinse in a champagne flute, add some ice. Then you add cognac, Cointreau, Suze, which is an aperitif, into a mixing glass. Stir until chilled, and then it's basically ready. And then you garnish with a lemon twist.
It sounds very good.
Yeah, it does sound really good.
So when we say an absinthe rinse, that just means you're pouring it in the glass, kind of swirling it around and dumping it out. You're just getting the flavor of the absinthe.
A little bit of flavor, yeah. No, you should definitely go get a Sazerac.
I might do that.
I always feel like when I order a cocktail, sometimes I don't do this, but often I don't want to do something that I can make myself.
That's fair, yeah.
You know, so like gin and tonics or whatever. So Sazerac is often, if it's like a nice cocktail bar, I go to.
What's stopping you from making a Sazerac at home? I mean, you can buy
Good question.
You can buy all of those things pretty easily. You probably already have bitters.
My problem is that I only have gin.
Oh, wow.
I guess.
That'll do it.
Yeah. That's what's stopping me.
Are you a Negroni fan? Do you like Negronis?
I love Negronis.
That checks out, yeah. I also very much like Negronis.
Boulevardier is a Negroni, but with whiskey instead of gin. And I like that. I order that sometimes in cocktail bars, too.
I've had Negronis with tequila as well.
Oh, I don't like the idea of that.
It's pretty good.
Do you remember this was like kind of went viral a couple of years ago where the Game of Thrones actress was asked her favorite cocktail? And she was like, it's a Negroni, Spagliato. Do you remember that?
I do. I do remember that.
And it's a Negroni with champagne or Prosecco instead of a gin. And it's really good. I've had that too.
Yeah.
No?
I mean, it's fine, but it's just like, that's your favorite drink.
I love anything with bubbly in it. So I was like, I could dig with that.
Fair enough. See, I don't like it because it makes me feel bloated.
It makes me feel like I'm in like party mode.
The nice thing about like a Negroni for me is that it's an aperitif mixed with gin, which is botanicals. So it's very like, it settles your stomach. It's very calming. So then to add this element of like bubbly champagne, just kind of like.
I see. Makes sense.
I'm typically not a fan of wine cocktails, though I do love a Red Moon over Manhattan, which is, I'm basically a Manhattan with red wine in it, but it's very pretty. It gets this nice, it gets like a nice purple gradient to it.
I think you've talked about this before, and I'm still dubious about it, but.
Well, if you're listening and you have opinions on champagne cocktails, and you want to write in, let us know your favorite cocktail and 2 fun facts about Malcolm X by sending an email to podcast@allthat'sinteresting.com.
I would love to hear if anyone knows about, because we talk, often on the show, we try to talk about cocktails with like some sort of history or a story in history.
Right.
So it'd be cool if people had any stories about cocktails that have a historic basis.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned it before, but I have a book that's all about the botany of spirits and cocktails and things like that, and it often gets into the history of them.
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. It's called The Drunken Botanist. It's very, very interesting. That's actually what made me like gin, is reading that book.
Wow. You can also call us at 929-526-3029 and leave a voicemail, which is another way to get in touch. And otherwise, you can always visit us on the site, allthat'sinteresting.com. It's new stuff every single day. You can also join our newsletter by going to allthat'sinteresting.com/signup, or you can become a member by going to allthat'sinteresting.com/membership.
And you can also follow us on social media. If you go to TikTok, that is going to be at Real History Uncovered. On Instagram, we are History Uncovered Podcast. And on YouTube, Uncovered History. Just to throw you a little curveball there. Make sure you're really listening.
Yeah, we're everywhere. We're all over the place on the web. Yeah, and I guess next week, I think it's Teddy Roosevelt. I think it must be because nothing else has been written that I know of. Okay. Our next episode is about the attempted assassination of Theodore Roosevelt in 1912. Pretty fascinating story.
Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah, and we're both big Teddy fans, so.
Yeah, I carry a big stick with me all the time.
Nice. Well, we'll have lots to talk about then.
Indeed. Until next time.
Yes, until next time.